Thought Reflection 0604-26, The Theory of Separation. You know, when you look at stories like Adam and Eve, most people focus on the idea of sin, punishment, or disobedience. But I wonder if there's another way to look at it. What if the story is really about separation? What if the Garden of Eden represents humanity living in harmony with nature, with reality, with whatever larger field we are part of? And what if eating from the tree of knowledge represents the moment consciousness began seeing itself as separate? Because after that, everything changes. Suddenly there's fear, shame, judgment, survival, and self-awareness. Humanity leaves the garden and enters a completely different way of experiencing reality. The interesting thing is that I don't necessarily see that as a mistake. What if it was part of a larger process? I've talked before about the spiral model, and this idea seems to fit. Maybe consciousness begins in unity, then it separates. It develops individuality. It gathers experience. It learns through struggle, creativity, love, loss, and all the things that come with being human. And then maybe, eventually it starts moving back toward connection again, not as the same being that left, but as something transformed by the journey. What I find fascinating is that this pattern seems to show up everywhere. Different cultures, different religions, different myths, but the same basic theme. A departure, a forgetting, a journey, a return. And that makes me wonder if the people who created these stories understood something that we're still trying to understand today. Not because they necessarily had all the answers, but because they were able to wrap ideas inside metaphors that could survive for thousands of years. The story remains the same, but each generation finds new meaning in it. The words don't change, but we do. And sometimes a story we've heard 100 times suddenly reveals something we never noticed before. The more I look around, the more I feel like humanity has become disconnected from the larger reality we're living in. Not because it's hidden, but because we're distracted. We've become so focused on survival, productivity, conflict, and constant stimulation that we rarely stop to notice how incredible reality actually is. We're surrounded by mystery. We're surrounded by beauty. We're surrounded by things we barely understand. And yet we often act as though we've got everything figured out. The older I get, the more I realize that's probably not true. In fact, the deeper I explore consciousness, history, nature, and existence itself, the less certain I become about what I know. And strangely, I think that's a good thing. Because humility creates room for wonder. It creates room for curiosity. It creates room for the possibility that reality is far larger than our current understanding of it. Maybe that's part of what we're missing right now. Not knowledge. Wonder. Because people can live in completely different realities while sharing the same world. One person sees beauty. Another sees only problems. One sees connection. Another sees separation. The world is the same, but the experience is different. And maybe that's one of the greatest challenges facing humanity today. We have become so focused on the small reality directly in front of us that we've forgotten to look up. We've forgotten to wonder. We've forgotten that there may be something far larger happening around us than we currently understand. Maybe the question isn't whether reality is bigger than we think it is. Maybe the question is whether we're willing to see it. Haggis, my esoteric journey.